Si Cristo ba nakarating sa siyudad ng Roma? Hindi. Pero bakit may iglesia ni Cristo doon? Sino isinodo? Si Apostol Pablo. Yun bang iglesia sa Roma? Tinawag iglesia ni Pablo? Oh, bakit mo tatawaging iglesia ni Manalo ito? Sabi ni Cristo, they are my sheep. Pero they are not of this flock. Hindi sila kabilang sa iglesia noon. Kaya nga, in the future. Ito yung future.
The Iglesia of Manalos proved themselves that they are cult, as they said they don't belong to the earliest church that Jesus had built. An eligible question, saying, did Jesus gone to Rome? The fact Jesus is omnipresent, in presence, not in body, because Jesus is Christ, or the one of these, the Word, the mind of God, the God. Sample, John 1 verses 47 to 50. Both Paul and Peter gone to Rome, as these two are the one who declared the Roman, mainly the Europe, the descendants of Esau, as the overseers and or the shepherds, or the priests of the flocks, or the churches of God and Jesus, or the ones that will minister the church of God and Jesus, has been called Roman Catholic Church, originated from the Church of Abraham, to Church of Isaac, to Church of Jacob, Church of Judah, to International Church of Peter, then to International Church of Romans, or RCC. Such a merited question, why will the church in Rome be called as Church of Manalos, as Felix Manalo just exist in the year May 1886, May 10th? It is of the fact that in your policy you go Manalos as my church, referring for the house he built. Yes, he built it by his own, unlike what was built by God and Jesus to Abraham, being called as Abraham, and unlike what Jesus had built to Peter, so as to be called Church of Peter International, and unlike what Jesus built to Romans through Peter and Paul, through Jesus' words, what you bind in this earth will also be bound in heaven. So as when Peter and Paul declared the Romans as shepherds, or as the priests, or as the overseers of the flocks of God, or the churches, or Church of God and Jesus, that ministry that they built will also be bound in heaven, as calling it the Roman Church International, or RCC. As Jesus said, what God had opened nothing can shut. So as when Peter and Paul declared the Romans as the priests, overseers, and or shepherds of God, that just mean to them the Church of God, which was also been called as Church of Christ, was been continued. If the church being ministered by Felix Manalo is the Church of God and or Church of Christ, then why they don't want it to be called as Church of Manalo, if really God and Jesus built his church to Felix Manalo? But ironically, it was not indeed built by God and Jesus, so as it is indeed the only Church of Manalos. This minister of the Iglesia of Manalos said, Jesus said, they are my sheep, as this minister of Iglesia of the Manalos is referring to their group. But they said, but they don't belong to the earliest church, so as they proved that their church or sect is other than what was built by God and Jesus before, that what Jesus had said, what God had opened nothing can shut. Such a stupid teaching. He said they don't belong to the earliest church built by God and Jesus, but what God will build in the future. Stupidity. What God will build a church other than what he has already built, as he is the same God to be worshipped. As was written, one God, one faith, doctrine, one baptism. If I say one God, that just mean one faith or one doctrine, and one church, as with two main branches. Of us to say one baptism, that just mean as one pen or church, which means wholeness of believers of God and Jesus, as about Matthew 20 verse 19, which mean one God and his three persons. Indeed, this minister of cult of Manalos is referring to John 10 verse 16. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. Jesus here is referring to the lost sheep, meaning before in the pen or church also, but who were astray, as Jesus is referring to Jacob brother Esau's descendants, the Romans, mainly the Europeans and Ishmael descendants. Here Jesus clearly said, there must be one flock or one church and one shepherd. So if the cult of Manalos said, they don't belong to the earliest church of God and Jesus, then that just means that the Iglesia of Manalos is a fake church of Christ. And as to them Jesus is only a man, but Jesus said he is a God, and worshippers must worship the Father and the Spirit and the Son is in one God. So if this Iglesia of Manalos is not believing these, then they are really a fake church or a cult. But ironically, this cult also teaches contradicting their own teachings, that they just allied to the church that were already established, Then why they said they don't belong to the earliest church? Then why they're having different doctrine, as they don't believe the Holy Trinity? Then why they have their own angel, own prophet or sent, own highest leader, as they are not associated to whom God/Jesus had in order to minister the church forever and to deal everything related to the Lord?